eye contact over here with our secretary. Uploaded.
Shit, there's 89 pages.
Are you guys ready? Yes, I can. Do you have a little script for me? Wait a minute, what did I do with the one you gave me? Okay. I'd like to call the Transportation Commission meeting to order on Monday, February 5th, 2018. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of the December 4th regular meeting minutes and the December 14th study session minutes. Can someone make a motion?
I move to accept.
All right. The motion is made by Commissioner Hurt, seconded by Commissioner Dillon to approve.
No.
What? Oh, you said it?
Schwartz, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear correctly. Seconded by Commissioner Schartz to accept the regular minutes from, or the minutes from the regular meeting on December 4th and the study session minutes from December 14th. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. The next item on our,
I need to abstain for the 14th.
oh,
I'll vote yes.
we have one abstention for
For the study session.
study session minutes on December 14th, for the record.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the general public comment. We ask that the public address us on any item that's not already on our agenda, and it's a 5-minute time limit if you represent an organization or a group, and a 3-minute time limit otherwise. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address us at this time? Please come forward to the podium, introduce yourselves, and sign. There should be a sign-in sheet.
I signed it.
Okay. If anyone else is going to speak tonight, there is a sign-in sheet we'd like you to fill out. And then just make the comment, since you're representing an organization, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeannie Friedel, and I'm principal of Woodlawn Elementary, and getting a cold, sorry, in Lawrence. Our school is the only public school north of the river and near the Union Pacific tracks. I'd like to share my safety concerns with you from a recent experience. This is my 12th year as principal of our school. During the time I've been there, we've had several trained safety programs at our building and have one scheduled this year on May 9th. We've participated in safe routes to school and are encouraging our students to walk or ride their bikes to school more often. During walk to school and bike to school days, I secure parents and the local police to help ensure that our students get across the tracks safely. An incident happened this past December which is causing me to elicit more assistance. We had 2 classes of 2nd graders who walked to an adult daycare facility, Midland Care, to share some songs with the residents there. To get there, we had to cross the train tracks for the short 5-block walk. I went with the students both days, as our music teachers had never been to this facility before. To take the students over the 3rd Street crossing or the 7th Street crossing would have necessitated taking our whole group on the street, as there are no sidewalks at those crossings. So I made the decision to take the classes across the walking crosswalk on 4th Street. This is a crosswalk that is designated for pedestrians and has a crossing guard in the mornings, but does not have any signaling devices. The first day we went across, both coming and going were fine, no incidences. The second day on the way back, a train was on the tracks. We stopped about 15 yards from the track and waited for the train to pass. I then looked both ways and we began our journey back to school. As I had crossed the first track with a few of the students, I heard a train whistle blow from the west, around the curve. I signaled to the group behind me to stop and wait, and took those students who were with me across the rest of the way. One of the students behind us in this first group panicked and ran toward me. I went back to get her, and we were able to cross in plenty of time before the train actually arrived. However, this little girl and several other students were traumatized by this event. I made several phone calls home to parents that evening to share what had happened. We are encouraging our students, our parents, and our staff to be more physically active to encourage more healthy lifestyles. This isolated event has caused me to wonder how many other close calls have happened to the pedestrians in North Lawrence. There is a real need for safety warning devices at that crossing or an overhead or underground crossing at a different location. Residents in this location need to know that they can safely cross the railroad tracks. I have contacted the Union Pacific officials as well, and please let me know what I can do to further share this information with anyone who makes decisions on these requests. I would be glad to talk or meet with anyone. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you. Have you shared that with staff as well?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And I have, this is that if you like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to address this? Okay, then the next item on our agenda is the election of a chair and vice chair. I would like to open nominations for the 2018 Transportation Commission Chair to the commission members.
Do you want me real quick just to state what I had in that memo?
Who said they would do it?
Yeah, so
Or-
we had a few commissioners express interest to staff. I just wanted to get that up for everybody in the room so that everybody was aware. I know you guys have seen it. So for the two who volunteered for either vice chair or chair were Commissioner Payton and Commissioner Ziegelmeyer, and then Commissioner May and Commissioner Evans were interested in vice chair, so.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. So I'd like to open up nominations.
I will start. First of all, I think both Aaron and John would be good choices. I think we'll figure out here in the next few minutes which way to go, but either way, I personally would be comfortable with. I would like to nominate Aaron, and I'll give you a few reasons why I've landed on that. We did talk at our retreat last couple weeks ago about factors to consider, and I've listed 3 in this order. And I know there's probably some discussion around this, but I think for me the first factor would be depth and experience and knowledge of transportation issues in Lawrence. Just, time spent with issues like this, to me, that's the top priority. Secondly, knowledge of how the city government works. Erin's on the Planning Commission. She has been involved in various advisory boards for a long time, and I think she's been around the track pretty thoroughly in terms of how the city government works. And thirdly, facilitation skills. There may be folks that think that's a top priority. I personally think that facilitation skills, after a couple of times doing this, one could probably get pretty comfortable with that. So with that, I'd like to formally nominate Commissioner Payton for chair.
So Commissioner Payton is nominated. Are there any other nominations?
Yeah, I'd go ahead and nominate Commissioner Ziegelmeyer.
All right,
Reason being, I think, experience in the Traffic Safety Commission. I think either one would be great. Either one would do a good job. Aaron brings a lot to the table in this. I think, though, one of the things that key to the chairman is just being able to run a meeting. A public meeting is fairly key. I think Ziegelmeyer has more experience with that, with his years in the Traffic Safety Commission. But again, either choice I'm actually very comfortable with.
all right. So Commissioner Ziegelmeyer is also nominated. Are there any other nominations?
Can I speak?
Yes.
I appreciate the nomination, but after thinking about it, I'm going to decline. I've had my opportunity. I served two rounds as chair of the Traffic Commission here, 1 round of chair as Traffic Commission in Wichita, and I think I've done my time. I think it's the opportunity for someone else.
Well, thank you for your willingness. to do it if no one else was there to do it for us. Are there any other nominations? Okay. So if there are no other nominations, then all in favor of Aaron Payton being our next chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Commissioner Payton, you're now the chair. You want to swap seats here with me?
Is that how it works?
Yes, sir.
Take your nameplate.
That's mine.
Okay. I would like to open up nominations for the 2018 Transportation Commission Vice Chair to the commission members.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Evans. And just to say that serving on the subcommittee for the Complete Streets, I've always found him to be good at leading the agenda, very organized, very thorough in his research of what we need to know to do our job, and I think he would do an excellent job as vice chair.
Are there any other nominations? No other nominations? Okay. Nominations for vice chair are closed. All in favor for Commissioner Evans for the 2018 Transportation Vice Chair, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. So, I guess, congratulations to you. All right, so on to agenda item number 4, receive the field check plan for the 9th Street, New Hampshire to Delaware.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dave Cronin, City Engineer, Public Works Department. I'm going to briefly introduce this item and then turn it over to Bartlett & West, the consulting engineers that are working on the plans for this project. Last summer, the City Commission gave us some direction on concept plans to reconstruct East 9th Street from New Hampshire to Delaware. This project predates this group by a number of years. There was a group that worked on integrated art concept for reconstructing this street corridor. Following that, staff presented a more basic street design option that the City Commission directed us to go with that mainly reconstructs the existing street with new concrete pavement, new sidewalks, street trees, curb and gutter, storm sewer. Bartlett & West has been working on design plans, and we're going to kind of walk through block by block some of the options or some of the plans for the project. This is a project that is in the 2018 CIP to be constructed this year. I think we have a $2.5 million budget, and we are right now 50% of the way through design plans, what we call field check plans. So we've just put the lines on the plans and wanted to get those plans out for public comment. So we've attached a link to these field check plans on the Transportation Commission website, so folks can go online and view the details. We are still, like I said, in the preliminary design stages. There are a number of things that we still need to discuss and make decisions on as far as design details and design elements with the project. So today we're going to kind of walk through the project. If folks have any comments, we'll get those after the presentation, and if there's any questions from you, we'll try to answer those as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Bartlett and West to kind of walk through the project. You want these?
We'll get to that in 1 second. Let's minimize this real quick. Go ahead and play the video here real quick while I'm talking, but my name is Darren Ammon. I'm with Bartlett and West. Also with me here tonight is Casey Colburn and Dane Martin. Dane and Casey know a lot more about the technical details of the plans than I do, but I've been involved with this for a long time as well, and glad to see it moving forward and trying to help East Lawrence get some street reconstruction done. Initially, wanted to talk real briefly about this is a 50% set of plans. So I've been involved with this again for a long time. I thought it's really important to get the voice of the neighbors involved, and that's why at the 50% plans we've had a chance to do some reconstruction on some of the things that were talked about early on with the overall plan that was talked about with the East 9th project when Eldorado Architects were involved. Obviously things have changed a lot given the direction from the City Commission at that time. But there's still a long ways to go. And we do want to hear the important feedback from the neighbors and all of you today in terms of things, as Mr. Cronin mentioned, there's been no decision on whether we're going to have all concrete sidewalks or brick sidewalks, how many light poles, the type of light poles. A lot of those details are still to be hammered out. So really appreciate all of you folks from East Lawrence being here and look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. We've talked with some of those already. We've got information, but we definitely want to hear more. So Dane's going to take you through a block-by-block description of where we're at today. And then we'll open it up for any questions because I think that might be the easiest way to answer some of the questions that you have. So thank you. Dane?
Hello. We get to the block exhibits. The layout and design is, of course, came from the City Commission and the concept design that Dave Cronin put together for us. And it's the direction we're taking on all the new improvements. This is New Hampshire to Rhode Island, and the existing width of the street was 61, just a little over 61 feet wide, and we're going to go back with the 54-foot wide street, so we'll gain a little extra green space between the sidewalk and the curb. Just on the eastern half of that block. The western half, we're just going to keep the curb where it is and just replace the pavement, since a lot of that has been newly developed from all the construction and the new buildings in the area. So we're just replacing the pavement to get that upgraded. And by the intersection of Rhode Island, we're doing the bulb outs for the sidewalk crossings to match the other end, the downtown look for safety with the sidewalks. Going to the next block from Rhode Island to Connecticut, we have the bulb outs again for the crosswalks at Rhode Island on the other side of the intersection. And then the existing street width is almost 61 feet, and we're going to go back with the 54-foot width to give a little more green space between the sidewalk and the curb again. We're also going with 6-foot sidewalks through here, and I think the existings are a little bit narrow, between 4 and 5 foot, so we're getting a little better walking. And it's going to be all ADA compliant with the 2% cross slope through here, and it's going to match the grade of the road for the longitudinal slope. And then at Connecticut, we're kind of getting away from downtown, so we're stopped doing the bulb sidewalk crossings. Now from Connecticut to New York, the existing width was 39 feet, and we're going to go back with 39 feet with the same width. Going to put the sidewalks on both sides at 6 foot, and that's going to give us a 12-foot green space between the sidewalk and the curb through this area. And we're going to put angled parking in there. Right now it's just kind of just open concrete, and there's no like stall widths or anything. It's just kind of park where you want to in that area. So we're going to go back with some angled parking with some striping for that section right there. And then at New York, to improve the drainage in that intersection, we've heard comments from neighborhood that there's a drainage issue in there, so we're going to end up taking all the bricks out and improving the grades, putting concrete underneath and putting the bricks back on top, and putting an inlet in there to help with that drainage. On this block, we are going to make some improvement on both sides of the road. The grade goes up pretty steep, so these driveways are pretty steep, and the alley entrances are also steep. And also with the church, so we're going to raise the grade about 1 foot and 1.5 feet in the middle, and it kind of tapers back down on either end of the block. And we're going to take out these trees by the church and put in a sidewalk that's going to be ADA compliant, and put a wall through there, so they'll keep their existing sidewalk up by the church. The bricks will stay there, and we'll just have the new sidewalk going through along the back of curb. And it's going to be a little bit wider, 7.5 feet wide, to help with parked cars that may park right there. And towards the alley, we're going to connect the sidewalk back up with the church's brick sidewalks there on the south side. Then mid-block there on the north side, which is the right up here, they had parking, kind of a short perpendicular parking, and we're going to put sidewalk through there to keep the sidewalk connection through there, and so we're going to remove that perpendicular parking and just put on-street parking. And we're going to meet with the owner later this week about that. And more curb inlets as you get to New Jersey. And the last complete street block from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. The existing width is 31 feet wide, and we're going to go back with 31-foot wide street. So it got a little bit narrower than the last block. And we'll have 16 feet of green space on the north side and 15 feet on the south side. And I think we're just trying to get away from a fence or something on that south side. And the 6-foot sidewalks on both sides through this area. And then at Pennsylvania, that was newly constructed just a few years ago, so we're just matching that construction line or that new pavement there. And we're going to continue the sidewalk on. So the next block from Pennsylvania to Delaware, on the south side, there's not a sidewalk that goes completely through there. There's brick, but it's kind of overgrown with grass, and I think it stops past the building there. So we're going to connect it all the way through with the sidewalk with ADA compliant 2% cross slopes all the way through there. And we're going to have to replace part of those driveways in that area because of the sidewalk. And also make the connection with sidewalk ramps and crossings at Delaware on both the north and the east path. And on the north side, the existing sidewalk is new up into the alley, and then so we're just going to continue. There's no sidewalk there now, and we're just going to put the new sidewalk in right there to complete the connectivity to Delaware. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission?
I have a few questions. Is that video been posted online for anyone to look at, or? Okay. The Connecticut is where the bulb outs end. And I was just curious, was there a consideration for the distance that pedestrians have to cross? I mean, that's pretty wide crossing right now.
You said at Connecticut?
Right.
I think the truck movement that's turned through there, the radiuses of those curb returns don't allow for those bulb outs because the
Okay.
trucks would end up going over the top of those sidewalks.
Is there, I know there are curbs that are designed for trucks to drive on. Is there any, I don't know how much truck traffic there is. When I was out there this weekend, I didn't see much. So,
Yeah, it's not very often, but they do come through there. And we haven't been directed to do the bulb outs in that area from the concept plans. So that's probably why we haven't.
other than the truck traffic, is like, maybe I was looking at the stormwater inlets and I wasn't sure if those were non-negotiable, or it just seemed like along the street there's a lot of effort to reduce the distance that pedestrians have to cross with the bulb outs, and then that one just kind of stands out as quite an exception.
Right.
So,
Because we're getting away from the, I guess the idea was we're getting away from the downtown, the main pedestrian traffic, more towards the residential side. Maybe that's why.
the rest of the crossings, when you go further away from downtown,
Yeah. Or,
they're less than 40 feet. So it just seemed like,
right.
to be
I
consistent,
understand.
it'd be nice to have that 40-foot
Okay.
crossing. And
I guess we'll.
I was just curious, is there a reason why that couldn't be done? Or is it just,
Yeah, I suppose we could do that. We could see what the commission.
I think,
Not a reason it couldn't be done.
okay.
Yeah.
I think that could make a big improvement for people that walk along Connecticut.
Okay.
I was kind of curious on the total number of, like, a lot of neighborhoods a lot of neighborhoods talk about parking and whether there's enough parking, and I imagine you probably did some analysis to demonstrate how many parking spots there exist today versus with the new design. Do you have those numbers? Is it more or less the same?
More or less the same.
Okay.
Some of those parking spots that I was talking about didn't have the full width, and they were pretty short, so we couldn't go back in with the standard size in that area. So we kind of, if you're counting those as actual parking spots, we're going to go with less then, but we're going to have better lengths and widths for parking stalls. With the angled parking, and then the one I was talking about was shortened. We're just going to go with the parallel parking on the street.
Is there parking permitted along the entire corridor? Or is
Yes,
it-
on both sides.
Okay. So even where that's the 39?
Yeah.
Where it goes to 31, but it's only on the one side,
Yeah.
but we're not striping it for any specific side, so it's just what the traffic can go through.
Okay.
Yeah, for the majority of the distance, parking as it exists today will exist in the future. So if there's parallel parking today, on-street parking, there'll be on-street parking.
Okay.
after the project.
And then last question I had was just the number of trees. I see some that are being removed, and I wasn't sure, like, when it's all over, are there more trees or less trees?
Well, right now, there's 6 trees that are being removed, and with this new design, it was definitely important to keep as many of the existing trees as possible, because we knew that was really important to the neighborhood. We've been working with Crystal Miles, with the Parks and Rec, haven't, again, formalized any plan, trying to get the traffic movements and safety, the bulb outs and different things that we've been talking about kind of hammered out first. But we've had some general ideas and want to hear from the neighborhood if there's any other concerns. The 3 red buds that are in front of the church are going to have to go because of the transition in grade, raising that up 1.5 feet and then making it ADA accessible. Unfortunately, we can't do anything with those 3. We've talked with them a little bit about maybe having some trees put closer to the church if they're acceptable to doing that as a potential street tree replacement, so that's another option. But so we're losing 6 to answer. That's a long-winded answer to say we're losing 6.
But we're going to replace.
Yes,
We're going
yes,
to replace.
but none of that's been hammered out. We're definitely going to replace trees as we can. So that's the other thing I want to make sure on the record here, so folks are aware of the plans that are on here. There's the circles, and I'll point to them here. The red circles. Those are just purely a placeholder for lighting right now. We've started to look at that. Depending on what standard we're going to use, if it's going to be taking the light poles from the downtown area all the way through the corridor, a couple blocks, if we can. We've just talked with Mr. Cronin about that a little bit in terms of maybe raising those, because the lighting is going to be a substantial cost to figure out. We want to make sure it's done right, it's lit safely, and again, work with the neighbors to what the feel is appropriate for the neighborhood and how far that transition wants to go through the corridor. So just want to make sure folks were aware of that don't get too married to the exact location. They're just a representation at this point. So.
Thanks. That's all I have.
We have some general questions. I'm not sure when I should ask them, though. I'm curious about the process. I see we're like midpoint in construction drawings, so we're pretty far along here. And I know some public folks are going to speak too, but Bartlett and West, were you involved from the beginning with El Dorado, or?
Correct, yes.
You were, so
yes.
You've been around
yes.
the whole time?
Many years, yes.
Yeah.
Feels like. So, but again, the directions kind of went 360, 180, however you want to look at it. And we went from a full-blown corridor design with arts and all kinds of different stormwater BMP functions to a basic street design to try to fit the budget and safety needs from New Hampshire to, we'll call it Delaware, but basically Pennsylvania. That's the main corridor. I'm trying to work all these things in. So the process at this point has been take the plans, go back from where we were, get this basic street design in, work with some of these challenges to get it to a 50% point so that we can get it in front of you, get neighborhood input, work through any remaining challenges, and I know it's still the intent of Public Works and the City Commission to try to get this bid and out to construction later this year, summer-ish, let's call it there. So that's been the process to this point. Again, nothing is nailed down in stone when we say 50%. We want to get all the input we can and take it from here. But we wanted to make sure we were far enough along that we didn't just come with another glorified concept and then say, well, we haven't really thought about stormwater and trees and all these other things. So,
well, I'm not interested in revisiting, the detail of the project and how it evolved, because we, yes. That's beyond what we're here for tonight. But I'm still interested, for the benefit of this commission, to understand the process beginning with, a vision of let's do everything, and the whole process of, reducing it down to a smaller project and eliminating bicycle facilities and things like that. Just, share what you can about that process for the benefit of moving forward on similar projects with this group here.
Sure. And Dave, I might defer to you a little bit, because a lot of that direction on what we have done has came from City Commission and through Public Works. So.
Yeah, so Commissioner, for this project, it's a little unique versus other projects in the process that we've gone through to get to this point, because there was so many meetings and public comments leading up to making a decision on what direction we went for the design. But back in early 2017, city staff put together what we called the basic street design option, and a cost, provided that to the city commission. With that basic street design option, we had some alternative items or alternate designs that we could add to that project. Bike facilities was one, underground utilities, if we were going to partner to pave to put some of the power lines underground for aesthetic reasons. The pedestrian lighting was another add option. We discussed those options with the city commission, and they gave us some specific direction on those with the bike, in regards to not having the bike facilities, to add the pedestrian lighting and not do the underground electrical. So some of these specific items, we got some direction from the city commission on last year. So this is kind of a unique project in where we're at today, and then coming to this board in the future. I think this is where some of those discussions would start in front of this body instead of at the city commission level. So as far as process goes, it's a little unique, but we're trying to use, going forward, this is the process for bringing some of the projects to the public. If there's any other specific questions you have, I'll try to answer them. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did. I just have maybe one or two other questions. One would be regarding the bicycle facilities. By that, do we mean the streets would be wider and there would be bike lanes? Is that essentially what was taken out of the project?
In our city presented design, the city basic street concept design, it would be adding bike lanes to the street to make the street wider.
Right.
When El Dorado and the consultant prepared their art corridor design plan, they had more of a side path or shared use path, almost like a cycle track on the south side of the street. It's still a bike facility and still took up right of way, but that was another option that was in that other concept plan. So for our plan, some of the decision making, I think, when we discussed the bike facilities last year, was it was additional pavement to make the street wider, and there's conflicting or conflicts with parking and providing more green space. So there's the different values in the project that were weighed, and that was one of the decisions that went into not pursuing the bike lanes.
Do we think that this design will enhance biking and walking in a positive way compared to what we have now? And why?
I'll give you my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
My opinion, it's definitely going to improve, number one, safety and accessibility for ADA reasons. Because right now you've got sections that don't have sidewalks, that are not compliant, bricks that are out of conformance, a multitude of issues all the way up and down the corridor. So with this plan, it's going to improve that safety for someone with ADA challenges to be able to use the street on both sides and function from that standpoint. So the bicycle question, again, the first process that we had went through as a sub with the other team, as Mr. Cronin mentioned, there was a lot of discussion on both sides of the table. Are we going to have bike lanes on both sides? Do we want a shared use path? Do we not want anything? And the direction that was given at the end of the day with the new, call it basic plan that's in front of you, was numbers, budget, and how it's going to function. It's not going to be an option. Improve the sidewalks, focus on improving the street, the drainage, save the trees, try to not lose parking. All of these were the priorities that were given. That's kind of on the table today. A lot of challenges, obviously, by getting back to your question. So I do think there's definitely a pedestrian enhancement connection. I'd say the bicycle enhancement is limited at best.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I just have a question about I'm not sure what exactly this is, but at the end, at 9th and Delaware, there's currently like a very,
Right here?
yep,
Okay.
on that, what is it, the,
North is
This is the north side. This is the wishing bench
uh-huh,
right there.
okay, so on the southwest side there, the little blip, I'm looking at the current road on Google Maps. I'm just
Okay.
wondering what that little point is sticking up.
Right here,
Nope, 9th and Delaware.
just down over here.
Yep, that.
Right there.
There's a, yeah, it looks like the sidewalk kind of sticks out, or the street kind of,
Yeah, I think that's an interesting intersection because this inlet is cut back very different, is the word I would use, as opposed to what you'd have with some street design. And I remember Bartlett and West was involved with a lot of the 8th and Pennsylvania redevelopment and the new Delaware Street, and this area had a ton of water. And between trying to get that to work with some of the new inlets and the movements, because there was a lot of trucks making this movement coming through here that's now, is, I think a lot of them for Penny's Concrete. They actually go down Delaware Street now since it's been rebuilt. But this is a very unique, again is the word I use, intersection because of that bump out, the stormwater, trying to get these two ADA accessible crosswalks in here to go over to the 9 Lofts and make that safe and as short as possible.
so is that stormwater drain, it looks like,
Right here,
Uh-huh.
yes, correct. And then
kind
it goes
of
underneath
in the
there.
road?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's
Not right against
offset a little bit, I guess.
Okay. All right,
This is standard for those curb inlets are offset away from the curb to keep well, people falling down into the gutter of those and the bikes and stuff. So they're
When
offset away from the curb.
Scroll up here real briefly. One thing I don't think, Dane, did you mention about the stormwater improvements that would happen here potentially?
No. not
Okay.
yet.
Just real briefly, talked with Matt Bond, city stormwater engineer, and there's been a lot of discussion back and forth about enhancing additional stormwater that was even beyond what was going to be potentially needed out here in the middle of the New Hampshire intersection, because the original plan was not to even get anywhere into New Hampshire, but I think there might be some additional stormwater box improvements out here, and that's outside of the funding of this, correct, in terms of what's going to be added, but it will definitely help with stormwater management. So I just want to make folks aware of that some of that would be coordinated as well. So
thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
we'll leave this up here in case there's any folks want to refer to it. And we do have a board and 2 sets of plans out there after the meeting. If there's folks who want to talk with us, we'll be glad to stick around a little bit. So thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks. So we can open this up now for public comment. If you are with an organization, you have 5 minutes. If you are a single person, 3. Please sign in and state your name when you come to the podium.
Hello, my name is Brad Gibson, East Lawrence resident. I've been following this project for quite a while. I'm going to give you a little background on it that you may not know. The city of Lawrence had $3.5 million to spend on this project. They hired Eldorado Architects, which hired Bartlett and West. The city ended up spending, with the $50,000 arts grant, or money from the arts grant, $320,000 on this project. And we set it aside. Okay, and so then Bartlett and West got the contract. They've been on it for over 2 years. And here we are today. I'm not really sure why. I know we have to have a public meeting according to their contract, so here we are. But I got a lot of things to say, but I'll just go through this real quick for you. Down here at Road, first of all, I got to say we're putting the cart before the horse. We should be a Historic Resource Commission right now, approving this before this was all designed, documented and blueprinted, or whatever you want to call it. There's so many things that have to go through the Historic Resource Commission before it can even go to the City Commission or maybe the Transportation Commission. And we had this problem last time with the project. So I'll just run through it real quick here. Everything looks pretty good. The city's basic street design had the street between Rhode Island and Connecticut Street down to 39 feet. Bartlett West increased it to 54 feet, so there's a center lane so that the delivery trucks can unload to the turn hall and whatever other business might come over time without people having to drive around the trucks to try to negotiate 9th and Connecticut. So the bulb outs aren't historic. They're going to have to go through Historic Resource Commission, but they are definitely safe because it is so hard to cross there. Just like one of the commissioners was saying, on Connecticut Street, you try to cross on Connecticut over to 9th Street, you got to run. Okay, so we go on down. Everything's good. I could have swore it said remove 4 trees. Bartlett West said 6. I don't know. So we go on down here. We come to New York Street. It's a brick street. It's been re-bricked within the last 5-10 years. And it's got to be ADA accessible to cross the brick street. There's 4 crossings there, and there's also one at 9th and Rhode Island Street that's going to be brick. It's got to be ADA accessible, which is not a problem. So then we go down, we're still at 9th and York Street, and there's a big drainage problem there. And I don't see any storm drains like Bartlett West. He said there was one there. I don't see one. There needs to be one there. There's no drainage, and there's no storm drains down at 8th and New York Street either. So we got all these brick sidewalks. Their design says remove all the brick sidewalks and replace them with cookie cutter concrete. The city's plan since 2014 was to remove and reset 500 square yards of brick sidewalk. And in the city's basic street design, 500 square yards of brick sidewalk to be reset.
Mr. Gibson, could you wrap up your comments?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so anyway, that's all been taken out. That's to change the scope of the project. The commission didn't agree to that. The governing body did not agree to change the scope in this project. All the bricks have been removed. That's a historic part of our neighborhood. You can't just rip out the history because it's easier and faster to go in and put in a concrete sidewalk. And the brick sidewalks got a bad reputation. They're bad, big maintenance problem. But the bricks have been there for 100 years. No sidewalk's been there for 100 years. Nobody's maintained the brick sidewalks. That's why they're in bad shape. They're ADA accessible. Many states on the East Coast do it, and we can too. We got 500 square yards of brick sidewalks. The projects have to change the scope. You people don't know what this project's going to look like after it goes to Historic Resource Commission, so you really can't even vote. So I would ask you tonight, I don't even know what your position is on this. Either defer it or wait until it comes back to the Historic Resource Commission. And there's a lot more to this project, but that's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got a timer going there?
Yeah.
I'm John Narramore. I've been following this also for quite a long time. I have questions on how this is going to work forward. I thought I heard the presenter say that it was not set whether there was going to be brick sidewalks or concrete sidewalks. So my first question is, if we go back to brick, which I agree we should, would you take them out and put a concrete base underneath the bricks so the bricks don't settle once they're in?
The street would have that for sure. The sidewalk, we talked with the city about what would be the best typical section for an actual sidewalk. The
street parts that we're replacing the brick will have concrete underneath those parts.
Then I would like to say that my preference would be that if we're going to come back with brick sidewalks, that they have concrete underneath them so that they don't end up like this and they don't end up rough. And people can walk on them with kids or wheelchairs, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of, so we're doing the street. I asked this at an earlier session as to what's going to happen with the alleys. The alley, so the alley entrance from the street, how far in are the alleys going to be? How far is the street going to be taken into the alley?
Approximately where the right-of-way line is,
how many feet would that be?
yeah, so
Okay.
this is the right-of-way line,
Uh-huh.
and so that's where kind of the edge of construction is. So the alleys will be taken in back behind the sidewalk, pretty
Okay.
much. A foot or two behind the sidewalk, depending on the sidewalk position.
Okay, and that's going to be concrete also? Okay. I got lost in the street widths as we go from New Hampshire. So what are we talking about, 54 feet, and then what are we doing each block by block?
Sure. I can help show you right on the plans here, John. Let me just go back to the beginning, how about? So here's New Hampshire, this is Rhode Island. On the plans, and they're listed out there as well. Existing street width here is 63 feet, and the new width will be 54 feet between New Hampshire and Rhode Island. If you go down to the next block, it's about 61 feet between Rhode Island and Connecticut, and it will be 54. So
Same as the other.
Right. Oops. Get from Connecticut to New York. Existing width here is about 39 feet, slightly over, and it's going to stay at about 39 feet.
So we'll go from 54 to 39, okay.
Okay. And if we go from New York to New Jersey, existing's 39, going to be about 39, going to stay about the same.
So it's going to be, okay.
These are your green buffers. So this is in front of the church. These are where the red buds are. Those trees are coming out. Finish up here real quick. 31 and 31 from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. Then the existing width of the street from Pennsylvania to Delaware is not being changed.
Very
Does that
good.
help?
Yep,
Thank
thank you. Now, I didn't understand the grade business between New York and New Jersey.
So currently, there's a really big difference between the center line of street and the church. The church is a great example because there's a wall right there. What we're doing is, where the center line of the street is, we're raising that a foot.
You're raising the street then?
A foot.
So then
So
it's,
the curbs will almost raise a foot, and so we're chasing that grade out, so there's a smaller difference between the back of curb and the porch of the church, if you look at it that way.
well, but as you come from,
Mr. Naramore, did you have anything specific that you wanted to address us about? If you have further questions, maybe you could hold them for Bartlett and West until after the meeting, or you could look at they could address specific questions from you.
they're all my questions are specific.
To them, to
Right,
Bartlett and West,
right.
maybe.
I
for-
thought,
I'd be more than
Okay.
happy to talk with you about it. We have the grades out there, I can show you.
well, the other thing I'm curious about, though, is, and I asked this at a city commission meeting, when people park to get to the church, okay, how, because of that, the grade, how are people, what's the plan to get people from the street level up to the church level? Because that is an issue now, where there's sidewalk, there's steps at the corner of Ninth and,
Well, sure. I'll show you here real quick, and then, oops, going to go the other direction. So here's the church today on the plans. You can see here's the steps that are leading to the church at the intersection of New York and Ninth Street. So this black line right here, that's kind of going right through the middle of these three redbud trees, that's going to be about a 2-foot tall retaining wall. because as Casey had mentioned, the grade is going to be changing out here in the street. And to try to make ADA accessibility work without, because you've got steps right here at the intersection, so that's obviously not ADA accessible to get folks to the front door. It would be ADA accessible on this new sidewalk running along this direction here. They would be able to come up.
A little ramp, is that it?
Basically, yeah, the sidewalk's going to change in grade, but it's going to make it flat enough so it's ADA accessible. Have some grade change, a little ramp through here. Then this is the existing sidewalk that would remain up front. So they can then get in this location, which I believe is the basement area, or to the, again, to the front of the church. That's how that's going to work right in that area. So this is, there's 1, 2, 3. There's 4 of the 6 trees that are being removed are in this section of the block.
But from New York, then this, is the street actually going to
Sure.
move up?
We,
We're gonna chase it out.
yeah.
Okay, that's all.
If there are specific questions,
Yeah, we'd be
we can
glad
answer them. If the public could ask the questions the commission that they want to refer them to staff to answer today, we can do that, but to keep things moving.
We'll be glad to talk.
All right.
Good question.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Katie Walsh. I'm speaking for the East 9th Street Placekeepers. And Commissioner Payton, I just wanted to let you know, by contract, the City Commission required them to have one public meeting with the community, and this is it. Unfortunately, we thought it would be a big open meeting on this topic. Unfortunately, it was put on your agenda. So that's why people are asking. This is our one and only chance. So that's why we're so specific. Anyway, so let's see. I am really pleased with this design, and I wanted to thank Darren Amon and Dave Cronin and the Commission for hosting this meeting. I'm mostly pleased with the basic design. I wanted to put in just a couple of caveats. Commissioner Bryan, I wanted to tell you, we had the head of Penny's Concrete at one of our meetings because their trucks were driving over all our curbs and crushing them. There is no concrete that can withstand trucks. And also the chief concrete engineer for the state of Kansas is on the East Lawrence board, and she concurs that there is no concrete that can truly withstand trucks. So, but I agree, it's unsafe at 9th and Connecticut, and you do have to run across that intersection. So, I'm sorry I got into that. I do like the bull bus at 9th and Rhode Island, better line of sight, shorter distance for pedestrians, people using wheelchairs, etc. I really like the planned transition from 9th Street into Rhode Island. That's a street where we in the 90s peeled the tar off the bricks, and they're doing a nice transition from the paved 9th Street onto the bricks, so that's really great. On the lighting, I would like to put in a vote for no cute or quaint lighting. It's utilitarian area, working class. I would like to see some straight ahead street lights. I'm very concerned that the historic brick sidewalks and limestone curbs remain on East 9th. We can make our brick sidewalk ADA compliant and retain the 100-year paving. Despite the widely held and mistaken belief that brick sidewalks cannot be ADA compliant, then why does the city use brick as part of our downtown sidewalks? And why does KU use it also on their sidewalks? I want to make you aware of the John Perlman Disability Issues Research Lab in Pittsburgh, PA. They contract with the Veterans Administration, MIT, and others on disability research. And I have, if anybody with a smartphone wants to take pictures, I have a lot of websites you can go to on this. Their lab did a research study with funding from both the Brick Industry Association and the International Concrete Producers Association. Both groups are obviously invested in ADA compliance. Vibrations harm people who use wheelchairs, particularly in the neck and the spine. The Perlman lab studied various concrete and brick surfaces for the least and the most vibrations. They also consider people who use canes, walkers, and have low or no vision. In the end, the safest, smoothest surface is brick, but not any brick. Hard paver bricks laid in a herringbone pattern, not laid in the, the one that we're used to in Lawrence like this. So they'd be at angles. Everybody know herringbone? Okay. And they have to have a bevel on the edge of no more than 4 to 6 degrees, so there's no trip hazard, and they have to be laid very close. Incidentally, the most damaging vibrations to people in wheelchairs were from the relief joints in concrete sidewalks. I also want to read a little bit about curbs and sidewalks from the Old Town East Lawrence Neighborhood Plan. This is an official planning document at City Hall, adopted by City Hall, and must be consulted whenever East Lawrence is part of any plan. Under curbs, the fiscal inventory of Old Town East Lawrence reveals that more than 1/3 of the neighborhood curbing is historic cut limestone. Limestone curbs provide character to the neighborhood and provide historic context for the residential, commercial, and industrial structures. Under policies and goals for curbs, there must be no further removal of historic limestone curbs. A bond should be required for any utility cuts that transverse historic limestone curbs. This is really important because we've had utilities cut through our curbs and sidewalks and never go back and repair them. Under sidewalks, I'm getting near the end, folks. Originally, brick sidewalks add immeasurably to the historicity of the neighborhood. Since 1990, many brick sidewalks have been restored in Old Town East Lawrence by federally funded community development block grants, which improve infrastructure in low to moderate income neighborhoods. And that was funding from the feds through the city, and volunteers did the work, volunteers from the neighborhood. Under sidewalk issues, each time a brick sidewalk is removed, damage is done to the historic nature of the entire neighborhood. Under goals and policies for sidewalks, property owners should be required to maintain and repair brick sidewalks on their property. Surplus brick, which is currently stored by the city, should be made available to property owners who are repairing brick sidewalks. Brick sidewalks should be identified as a contributing element in local historic districts or conservation districts. And that's all I have, but I feel passionate about this, and I'll be back every time to talk about bricks. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kirsten Yanuba Stevens, and Commissioner Evans had mentioned about bicycling, and I would just ask consideration that Sharrow lanes be marked on the street.
Hi, I'm Bruce Eggers. I'm a resident in the neighborhood. I go up and down 9th Street a couple times a day. Have had a few close calls on 9th and Connecticut, and so if a bulb out is, if that's the right word, is not going to work on that corner, I wonder if there's some kind of lighting solution, because I've noticed as a driver that it's so dark there that you can't see, and if there was something just like a little something that possibly the pedestrian could trigger to just like a little something, or to be lit up so that the drivers could see them, that would really help a lot. If you can't actually make the distance, if you can't make the curbs closer together, maybe just making it so that it's a little more attractive to drivers, that they can see, well, there's a person there. Because the times I've almost been hit, it's just strictly, it's dark, and there's no, you can't, your reflective clothing doesn't do any good if there's no light on you, because you're not in the path of a headlight and there's no overhead lighting. So that's a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from public?
Hi, my name's Josh Davis. I live along one of these blocks on York, across from the church. I guess I have just questions about procedure, and maybe it's the city staff or maybe you commissioners. Is there some type of next step involved in this? Is there a vote? Is there a further discussion, or is this the entirety?
I'll handle that. Tonight we're just receiving public comments. We've just put the plans out online to get people, provide everyone some time to review the plans and get some comments. And then we would prepare some design document to go to the City Commission to review before we proceeded to final plans and construction. So we'd at least want to provide them an update on what direction we're going to go with some specific items that we still know that we need to resolve, such as how many street light poles and where and how tall, brick sidewalks versus concrete sidewalks. So some of those design decisions I think will need to go to the City Commission. So the next step you know, staff will meet with Bartlett and West, we'll receive these public comments, and then provide some different options on proceeding to final design plans.
Cool. I just like to tell the commissioners, I think for what the plan is, I think it's pretty good. I would echo, I feel like the church, what's going on in the church, I think I have a better visualization now, and I would of course defer to the church itself and what they think is best. I think it'd be great to have kind of a facing image just to kind of visualize it, but that's just something that I would personally like. And then I would echo concerns about 9th and Connecticut. I wish I was a frequent walker. I walk some, but even with my very low walking, I have had a couple of very close calls at 9th and Connecticut, and I haven't had them at any other intersection, and I'm highly conscious, and yet I just in the past 2 weeks almost got hit by somebody. So I really think if some measures can be put in, and this is probably a body who might have ideas on that, I think it's something to really consider, because I do think it's a dangerous intersection as it is now. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Could I add one short thing? Very short. In terms of next steps, this must go to the Historic Resources Commission. And if the city planning department doesn't take it there, the citizens will take it there. Thank you.
Commissioners, I'm Verdell Taylor, pastor of St. Luke AME Church, and I know the church has had been referred to several times in other comments. And being on the National Register of Historic Places, I want to make sure that that is also taken into consideration. Yes, we're concerned about possibly losing 3 trees, but we've worked at trying to replace some of that based on what I'm hearing tonight. I am concerned also about whatever that retaining wall has to be, as long as it is safe and it's not a hazard to children or older people. And I know with that is usually a railing that would go. I just want to make sure, commissioners, that all those things are taken into consideration, and as long as it doesn't encroach upon the property of the church itself, and I know that's a bit of an encroachment, but you know, as long as it complies with the National Register of Historic Places, those are my concerns. And as the person that is in charge and held responsible there at the church, I just wanted to make sure that I voice that concern to this commission group. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a staff question. Since there is a National Historic Register site here and you're in the environments, does this have to go to the state SHPO, or is that authority deferred to the local historic resources?
I don't know about the answer to the state SHPO, but if it's in the historic environs, then it would go to the Historic Resources Commission. If there are changes that are made within the historic environment, so I'd probably clarify by saying that. So if, for an example, we decided to remove brick sidewalks from an area that was in the historic environs, that would go to the Historic Resources Commission. If we left the sidewalks, it would not, or it'd be an administrative decision. It would go to the Historic Resources Administrator, Lynn Zollner, who would review it. So we will consult these concerns with her on changes and get her direction on proceeding.
Is there any other public comment? So I'd like to bring this back to commissioners. Do you have any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion to receive the field check plan?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion was, Hulteen, yes, thank you, Don Hulteen. And, sorry, who was that? Ziegelmeyer, okay. To receive the field check plan for the 9th Street, New Hampshire, from New Hampshire to Delaware Street. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. 9, are there 9 of us here today? 9. All right. So, yeah, I know.
That's a tough one to start.
Yeah. So on to agenda number 5. Agenda item number 5, Lawrence Loop Alignment Study.
Hi, Commissioners. We're back again tonight to present the final draft of the Lawrence Loop Alignment Study. I have David Hamby with me from BG Consultants. If you have any questions more detailed about what I present to you, that he can help me answer as well. This study is a result of a year-long process through 2017 to really take the opportunity to envision 2 gaps in the Lawrence Loop, identified here in the dark green section. And the blue bubbles is really the gap areas that we took the opportunity to do a community visioning process with, to take some to identify with the public their kind of vision for connecting those facilities, but also look at the feasibility and some of the strengths and weaknesses of different alignments along those sections. We've been to you before and kind of presented the preliminary results. We've done some additional work since then, but I'm going to run through the whole process because there's some new members. Through the first public open house meeting, we sent out about 1,700 notifications to neighbors within a 200-foot boundary of larger areas. And we heard, these are kind of sum up the comments that we heard from the neighbors and the participants at large that participated in our public process. There was very, very strong support for a facility that is separated from the roadway and that had grade separations at major crossings, particularly in the alignments that had a crossing. If you think about 2nd and McDonald, about an opportunity to grade separate crossing there, and also thinking about the railroad and the crossing right now that you've heard a little bit of issue about an unsignalized rail crossing. There currently exists one along the Lawrence Loop facility at an unsignalized rail crossing, and we heard feedback from the community about safety and separation there. Also access to natural areas and avoiding driveways intersections as most possible, which really comes in line with removing it from street side. Out of the public participants, we had about 70 at the first series of the open house, and this is kind of the drawn out versions. This gives you an example of what people, the variety of different routes and alignments that we got from the community's visioning process. We're going to jump to the other section now, which is Sandra Shaw to Peterson Road. These are the 3 alignment options that we ended up, steering committee chose to vet back through the public, developing strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, assessments of those. And what's presented on there as percentages is the response that we got from the survey process for people's perception of alignments, with the A1, B1, the most northern alignments being the publicly preferred alignment, and that is in the study as the priority alignment. That alignment for that estimate will be about $1.3 million, barring additional expenses that could come about because of right-of-way and easement acquisition that have not been included in the current estimates. But again, that's the north A1 and B1 alignment options. There is an alternative option costed in the alignment if for some reason through engineering and design it's determined after additional acquisition that something comes up and it's not feasible, but the priority alignment was the northern alignment. And we have some of that in there. This is the second option, which we had brought to you previously at your previous meeting last year, between Bircham Park and Constant Park, and the alignments we preferred. Once again, the north and eastmost alignments that are removed from the street network were the preferred alignment options. Through some further discussion, we determined that the F1 alignment was not going to be feasible due to some grade changes. So we have proposed, we came back, that was what we had vetted through you. We came back with two options that would take a different route. And we went back out to the public with these after we came to visit with you about them. And we had, again, a preferred alignment that was removed from the street section that followed the rail corridor, and would remove the currently uncontrolled at-grade crossing with the railroad here along this at Constant Park. These alignments through the first priority segment, which would be the options that would follow the rail. The most option is just under $1 million. And this is another one where we provided an alternative alignment option that follows more street segments. If it was determined after engineering that the railroad would not agree to participate in this design option, that there's an alternative design alignment, which is D2, E2, and F2. And I'll show you those again for a second. This is D2, E2, and F2 as an alternative for those options. We have kind of the next steps of this study process and moving forward to get to implementation, some steps that have identified in the process and also that have evolved out of the work that's been done so far. The MPO is committed. The MPO Policy Board approved this study at their January meeting, and so the MPO will be working through the bike plan update, incorporate priority routes into the bikeway plan. That also will weigh into the decision to incorporate into future non-motorized prioritization models. There's a need for additional discussion with the BNSF Railway and KTA. Both of the preferred alignments cross or align with segments in their right-of-way, and so there will be a need to coordinate design and get appropriate approvals and negotiate things in the process, whether that be design or timing or construction or payment, with both of those alignments and options, whether that be segments of them or them in their entirety. There will need to be opportunities to pursue easements, and then obviously to pursue grant funding or other opportunities to supplement any funding that gets found to be identified for prioritized for construction. So that's kind of where we're at in this process. I would entertain any questions you might have about the priority alignments. We're asking you this evening to recommend acceptance of this study to the City Commission.
Any questions?
Kind of covered this pretty in-depth in a study session.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would entertain a motion to send this report to the commission.
We didn't get public comment first.
Pardon?
Public comment. Are there any comments from the public?
Hi, I'm Suzanne Hampton, East Lawrence resident, and I'm also involved with the Flat Friends of Lawrence Area Trails. And I just wanted to congratulate and thank the MPO and all you guys for getting input in this way. I think the process has actually gone really, really well. And I think that the public recognizes that, and we'd love to see it continue on this way in the future. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
One of us should be complimentary too. Good job. Thanks so much.
Any other public comment? All right, ready for that motion then?
Sure. Now I move, approve this report to be sent to the City Commission.
Is that Michelle? So we have a motion to recommend acceptance of Lawrence Loop alignment study from Ron May, second by Michelle Dillon. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes 9-0. Okay, on to item number 6, non-motorized projects prioritization policy.
Evening, Commissioners. Let me open up. So, you guys are probably wondering a little bit why I'm back, because we talked about this in December. However, we were, in December, the action from the commission was to recommend approval to City Commission for this policy. Since then, in talks with City Manager's office and the City Attorney's office, they've decided that they want this to be held as a policy at the Transportation Commission level. So I guess this will be our first policy here as a commission. So really it's just coming back as a technicality to approve this. Legal has looked at this and has made a few minor wording modifications. It does not change the intent of the policy. And we've obviously given it a Transportation Commission policy number. Outside of that, it's what you saw when we presented this last time. So that is all I have.
Item number 6. Questions from the commission?
I don't have any questions, but whenever I see, I think this rating system is great. It's very thoughtful. I'm always cautious about data-driven decisions being the end of the discussion instead of the beginning of the discussion. And so I want to keep reminding us that we still have work to do when we do get the results of, whatever's being evaluated in this arena. So, but I think it's excellent.
This is really just going to guide our recommendations.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things that are going to be taken into account, and you guys will also have say in which projects are selected in the end. But this is to help us get started in that.
And I kind of had a similar, really a comment, but I mean, there are things with it that I worry about, and it should be interesting to see what comes of it, because I think, the project ranking and selection kind of talks about looking at things like equity and parallel routes and stuff like that. So I think that will be important to look at too, but I think it's a great way to be able to evaluate projects, so thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Are there any comments from the public on this item? No comments? Okay. Back to the commission. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Hurt and seconded by Commissioner Schartz. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Motion carries 9-0. Okay. Let's see. We're on to agenda item number 8. Funding split. Wait a minute. 7. Getting ahead of myself there. CDBG application proposed project list.
All right, at the November 4th Transportation Commission meeting, the commission approved the city to submit an application for $150,000 in 2018 CDBG sidewalk gap funds. The specific projects were not listed at the time. We were hoping at the time to be able to get through our, get our policy, prioritization policy approved sooner than this and be able to actually really use that to help guide us. We did, being that we just passed the policy, we did run all the projects though and have an idea of which ones were ranked highly. So staff went through those higher ranked projects and $150,000 obviously is not a lot of money as far as getting you know, sidewalks somewhere where that doesn't exist. But we found some locations that we thought were easy wins to get connected routes in areas that were ranking high based on our priorities. Now, obviously, these can only be CDBG areas that we looked at. So the three projects, and they're ranked kind of in order right now that we're recommending, are East 15th Street from Haskell to Maple on the south side. It's only about 200 foot long. You can see it right here. But there is the East Lawrence Rec Center right here, and it connects over to the trail, the Burroughs Creek Trail over here. So I think it's a good place that could really use that connection. I think it's fairly straightforward. I mean, there's obviously some power poles and stuff we have to work through, but there appears to be sufficient right of way and everything in there. So that is the first recommendation. We have not done cost estimates on these yet, so we're not certain how much will be feasible. So as we get into looking at these, you know, I'm not exactly sure how far we'll get down this list of this 3, but we wanted to put more projects out there as possibilities for CDBG, and then we can refine it later once we find out the funding we receive. So they just ask basically for a list of potential projects. So the second location is, let's see, sorry, 19th Street, Delaware Street to Moody. This one is safe routes to school. Sorry, the other one is also safe routes to school. This one is mostly on a safe routes to school, the portion from the trail to Moody, but we felt like it didn't make sense to leave the portion out from the trail over towards Delaware. You see the existing sidewalk already continues, so it's a very small gap there that we'd be leaving. So we proposed to do that whole piece there. You can see some kind of pictures of what it looks like now. And the third location is Naismith Drive, 19th to 23rd. Now this one's kind of the third ranked, and I don't think that we'd be able to get likely this entire section done with this amount of money. However, we think it's a very high need. There's a goat path currently that exists there. Students are walking there. So it is a pretty high need, and I think it should be addressed at some point. You can kind of see here this path. There is some challenging areas through here with right-of-way, kind of in the center section. So we would have to work out how this would work through a few of these areas, but that's the third project. So those are the 3 projects we'd like to kind of submit to CDBG for consideration. Once we find out the money we receive, if any, then we would go into looking at cost estimates and which projects we think were really the most feasible with those funds. But we wanted to put more out there than what we were asking for, so that we were covered with enough potential projects. I know I added some correspondence today on public comment. I wanted to just discuss a little bit about that. That correspondence stated that this project was currently in the CIP. It is not. It's an unfunded project that was requested by Sustainability Action Network last year. It was not funded. So even though it was requested, it is not in the CIP. This also, the Ped Bike Issues Task Force identifies this as pedestrian facilities, not as bicycle facilities. We do have bicycle facilities on our bike project listing for this location, but it is not a shared use path in this location. It's sidewalk facilities and then separate bicycle facilities is how it's currently planned. Also, just important to point out, Naismith did not used to be in the CDBG area and now is. So it's kind of one of those why we decided to put that project in. It's an area that we feel like, whether it's this time or next time around, we might be able to get some leverage with the CDBG funds to complete that section. So any questions?
I have a question on that, what you just said, so you might just have to repeat it for me. But on the Pedestrian Bicycle Issues Task Force, I thought we identified this, it was sort of on the vision map. Is that what you're talking about? So
In the
Naismith
actual
was-
text of the document, there's tables.
Right.
And it's under pedestrian facilities.
Okay, so I think what he's referring to is there's a vision map that sort of looks at, it's marked in gray without pulling it up. I think the whole thing is marked in gray, is the vision map. And the vision map kind of looked at if, with the loop being completed, which was one of our top recommendation, I believe, what the spokes off of that would be. And so on the visioning map, Naismith Drive was one of those, and I think that's what was kind of being referred to. But it wasn't a recommendation.
Yeah,
It was just
yeah, we looked at the recommendations. There was nothing listed in the bicycle facilities. There was in the pedestrian. Really how we see this, I don't know if you guys can envision that the right-of-way through that section, there are some houses where the garage is 20 foot from the curb. And I'm not real sure how you would fit a 10-foot shared use path and leave them any usable driveway. And there's a couple houses in particular that it's very tight to the corner of the house. So I think just as staff, we looked at that and thought that a sidewalk, given that it's being used currently for pedestrians, that was probably the most feasible there. And then in looking at bicycle facilities later, looking at something with a redesign of the street, reconstruction of the street that would accommodate bicycles.
I'd just like to add a little bit to your statement, Aaron. The vision map and the tables that you noted in report, the tables were really to illustrate if the city commission were to allocate funding for bike ped projects, here's an illustration of what could be possible. So the vision map was the more complete framing of what the task force said would be a long-term vision. It wasn't limited by the funding. So, so those are, it's a little perhaps easy to misunderstand. Those funding illustrations aren't, they don't lay out exactly what it would cost to create the vision.
I believe, though, talking to Jessica, the report did not recommend any certain facility type.
Right.
No, it did not.
So it just recommended that being some type of facility in the future.
Right. The discussions were really about the low stress bike networks. So shared use paths and bike boulevards are kind of the how the task force kind of envisioned the bike network that was put in there. Does this commit that these projects are going to happen, or is this just for your application?
It's just to present to them for the application. They said that our application would be stronger if we had specific projects that were potentials versus just saying we're going to use it somewhere in the CDBG area for sidewalk gaps. So this is something that we just committed to bring to them by February to kind of finalize our application as potential projects that could be used for this. We reviewed several when we were coming up with these recommendations, and there's a lot of them where you get into needing to do, you know, there's currently no curb and gutter, and you have drainage issues and things like that that we just didn't feel like with this funding was really something we were prepared to tackle. We tried to find ones that were a little more straightforward, and we thought were good connections to kind of complete some areas that already had, you know, sidewalk kind of leading to it on each side, and that we could do just a connection and
But if you got the
complete a
funding
network.
and something came up, you wouldn't necessarily be tied to
Yeah, I'm not sure how tied we are if we get it, as it ever came up with them.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, we've applied for more sections than we got funds for and just went through the list and did the projects. But I think we should follow through on the ones that we say we're going to. So if we list these out, we should assume that we're gonna stick to it. I mean, I think that's the assumption.
Well, I'm not saying about bait and switch. I'm just saying if something came up for one of these, you couldn't.
Well, that was why we tried to list more than we knew,
Right.
because we figured with that we could
pick
accomplish at least one of these, if not a couple. You know, $150,000 obviously is not going to buy you all three of these, not complete anyway.
On the East 15th Street, to go west from Haskell, on the pictures you included, it doesn't show a sidewalk.
This is
on the
looking,
south side.
this is looking back this way. This is standing here looking that way.
Right, I'm going, turn the other direction, going west. On the
Okay.
south side of the street, I don't see the sidewalk. Is that
I'm not
scheduled to
sure.
be built with other funds?
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go look at our gaps and see. That might just not have scored as high for I don't know if that's not on Safe Routes to School. There's like 200 or something. I mean, there's a huge number of pedestrian projects, so I'm not 100% certain what that's scheduled for. But
I mean, I think this helps to get the connection to Haskell, but
Mhm.
15th Street's a pretty good street to be having sidewalks on, if possible. I don't know. I guess I'd like to know where that goes, and if that would be a better use of CDBG dollars.
well, I will tell you, we looked at everything scored like 8 and above in CDBG areas and tried to find very, I don't want to say simple, but you know, kind of easy connections in comparative to some of them we looked at that we knew there was a host of other issues. I don't remember specifically that one. You know, I sat down with Jessica and went over the stuff. That was not one that drew our attention, but I don't remember what's planned there because, like I said, there's so many projects. I don't think I have the link to pull up that. No, I don't. I don't have the link to pull it up right this second. I don't know if I can on here.
We are doing a section of 15th Street close to the Burrow Creek Trail as part of our Safe Routes to School Gap project. I don't recall if it gets all the way to Haskell,
I don't think it does.
but there is one section in there, so we'd have to double check that
I think it goes from Burroughs Creek west,
to the west.
and then there's a space missing where I always get confused, the 19th and 15th. Is Sunrise Project on 15th? Okay, then there's,
Yes.
then
Yes.
This says,
there's a missing sidewalk in front of Sunrise Project, and I think they're not gonna protest it if there were money to pay for it.
this,
That's on the Safe Routes.
The table I have says 15th Street, Rhode Island to 240 foot west. Oh, that's Hanscom. I'm looking for it on our table here to see. There's several segments on 15th Street as part of this.
It'd be Hanscom to Haskell.
Yeah, Hanscom to Haskell. Yes, this does have that as part of the plan sent for the Safe Routes to School. So we took all those out. We basically, when we created this list, we also took out anything that was part of any current plan. So there is this current Safe Routes to School that are, I believe, in for review. And what else was there? There was some other projects. We had, I think, 3 different lists of projects that have been approved but have not been implemented yet. So we removed all of those from consideration because they've already been considered in other grant applications. So that one is one that was part of the Safe Routes to School.
Well, I'm just recalling that application, and I don't think it covers the whole area. Because that goes to Leonard, I believe. Which then leaves Leonard to Barker as a gap.
I pulled the plans and I commented in here that it was included. I don't have it with me, but.
So as far as
I guess I'd like to make sure we have more information when we're making decisions, and this feels like an opportunity to do some more of the safe routes work. And you know, I know this one sidewalk in particular, I've raised it up in site plan review, and it's not funded to be done. So that's the one in front of Sunrise Project. So I don't know if that's, you know, I assume it's part of the CDBG area, but I don't know for sure. Seemed like an important sidewalk.
As far as the area on Naismith, sorry. Is there a plan, I kind of vaguely remember that there is, that Naismith will be redone in the next several years?
I think we've discussed maintenance or major maintenance type project on Naismith, whether it's mill and overlay and patching or something of that sort. We don't have any plans to reconstruct it, a full reconstruction. So maybe some opportunities with a major maintenance project to get bike facilities on Naismith. We haven't looked at it in detail.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think the challenge is that it's in that vision, but it's not, there's no specific bike facility recommendation or anything like that. But I mean, I think it could make a difference in what you would do there if you already have I assume that would be like a 6-foot sidewalk?
It need 5 by code. It's a
5 by code, okay.
Yeah, Collector Street. So minimum 5.
Minimum 5, right.
I think I made this comment when we discussed this before. Walking on the west side of Naismith from 19th to 23rd is not a lot of fun. It's really uncomfortable for a pedestrian. There are retaining walls, high volume, probably different times a day. Certainly high speeds, pretty typical. And all things considered, to get a safe sidewalk on the east side of Naismith would serve a lot of people, for what it's worth, in the context of just simply looking at that project. And I'd personally say the same thing about the other two. Given the money, like Amanda said, it's not a big chunk of change. And I think we'd be served well to get all 3 of these projects, or part of 3 of them.
I live at 22nd and Naismith, so I kind of see it all the time, and I like walking to Hobby Lobby and Dillon's and those kinds of things, but I have to cross the street and then cross there and then cross the other way. So if you're again talking about complete streets, it would make sense for pedestrians to have additional places. And plus, if you have a pet or something, that's kind of a good place to be if you have sidewalks, because 22nd Street has absolutely no lights at all, and if you're walking a dog at night, forget about it. And so that would just be an additional area that someone would be able to do that without having to cross the street. Just my opinion from living right there.
You ready for public comment on this? All right, public, if there's any comment on this agenda item, CBDG proposed project list, please.
Just go top right.
I don't know that he hear of the rules time-wise because he wasn't in the room.
There is the agenda.
That was the agenda.
Well, there's other elements that aren't part of the main agenda.
What you presented? What you sent in?
For example, yeah.
I have to go with the website.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes. Thank you, Amanda.
Hey, Michael. Are you speaking on behalf of the Sustainability Action Network?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
we
5
submit-
minutes.
Okay, we submitted some comments. So. Yeah, Michael Allman, Sustainability Action Network, and I sent in some comments, which is here. Thank you very much for bringing up the issue of the grant and the requirements of a grant. Working with a not-for-profit and being in a neighborhood that gets CDBG funds, every grant that I know of, whatever you put in the grant and you get awarded, you must complete it as you wrote it, or else give the money back. I can't imagine this particular grant would be any different, but so that's a key question. If, you know, I also appreciate what everybody said about walking on Naismith. We pointed out last year that that goat path is a major embarrassment. But everything that applies to the danger of walking on Naismith also applies to the danger of bicycling on Naismith in two ways. The sharrows on Naismith tell bicyclists you're supposed to be in with the trucks, the buses, and the cars in 10-foot wide lanes. It's a truck route. Nobody bicycles there. They bicycle on that dangerous sidewalk. It's not safe for bicyclists or pedestrians. So, the concern then is that if we're going to be spending money to resolve one half of the problem, let's spend the money to resolve the whole problem, bicycles and pedestrians. If we put a sidewalk on the east side of Naismith, it's pretty much going to rule out any future possibility of a shared use path that would serve both bicyclists and pedestrians. I don't need to tell you about the Lawrence Loop, but the spokes of the loop are the important part to make the transportation connections that tie the circumferential loop to the destinations in town. There are only 4 on this map from the Pedestrian Bicycle Task Force. Clinton Parkway, 6th Street, Lawrence Avenue, and Naismith. Naismith is virtually there, as you may have read, except for this one gap from 19th to 23rd. We could have a shared use path spoke of the Lawrence Loop by building that. If we put a sidewalk there, all bets are off. If, as the city staff seems to maintain in this fudging answers about whether a grant will lock them in or not, I mean, it's really it's a question of why would we want to just build a sidewalk when we can do both? If it's just a placeholder, if Naismith sidewalk is just a placeholder in the grant, they could substitute something later, which I seriously doubt. If it's just a placeholder, they should have no problem in putting something else in right now. Why wait till later? Let's have them put in a different project. Amanda just said there are some 200 projects out there crying for bicycle for CDBG gap funds. So let's do that. That pretty much covers what I needed to say. This map here on the right shows the existing Naismith Trail as it goes past Menards, over 31st Street, down Michigan to the Loop. that it now exists. It didn't exist 2 years ago when this pedestrian bicycle task force map was created, 3 years ago. But it does now, so this is the only remaining gap. That's what I wanted to put this map in here to point that out for you. So what we would propose, and did last year, in conjunction with the Pedestrian Coalition, I must say, this proposal for a shared use path was put forth by both of our groups. We wrote it and submitted it, but in agreement from the Pedestrian Coalition, it's true. I would urge you strongly, instruct staff to put in a different project instead of Naismith. That's taking up more than half the funds of the CDB grant application. Let's use that money more effectively. Let's not physically close out the option for a shared use path, and fiscally use that money much more wisely. So thank you very much. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Gary Weber, Lawrence Pedestrian Coalition. I'm not going to be long because I just want to second what Michael says. This is the spokes. We're very focused on finishing the loop, and that's very important, and it's a great task ahead of us. But spokes shouldn't be totally ignored, especially when we have the opportunity to avoid making one difficult. If we put a sidewalk along the east side of Naismith, it really does, unless David can convince me otherwise, it does tend to make a shared use path along there very difficult. I don't know what you're going to do. You can't tear the sidewalk back out. You can't widen it effectively. So I concur. I agree with Michael. I think we ought to hold off on a sidewalk on Naismith until we have the funds for a full shared use path. And then you've got a spoke. Then you've got a perfect spoke from the KU campus all the way to the Lawrence Loop. And that's what you really need. Because once we're done with the loop, that's where our attention is going to be focused next, is making sure we have good wide shared use paths all the way out from the core of the city. And if we put a sidewalk in here, it becomes extremely difficult to do that in the future. And it's just a little 6-block length. I concur. I think we really ought to find a better use for CDBG funds for sidewalks and hold off on Naismith, this section of Naismith, until we have funds for a full-blown shared use path. Thank you.
Could I make one last point?
Can we see if there's anyone else? I would like to see if there's anyone else in the public that wants to speak on this. Anyone else? Sure, Michael.
The option exists also for redoing Naismith Street per se, which Public Works does have in mind some reconstruction of Naismith. However, Mr. Cronin has told me personally, although it's not reflected in the CIP or the Transportation 2040 plan right now, that they would like to have on-street bicycle lanes on Naismith. I do not like that option. Bicycling on a truck route with the buses and the cars with a 6-inch wide white stripe as your only protection is not safe, and this community really should be considering moving away from the white stripe bicycle lane to protected bicycle lanes with a 3-foot wide buffered area. So that's why I think the shared use path is the option here. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Commission, any questions?
Yes, I have a question for Dave and Amanda. You can't do a shared use path as part of this grant?
I think we could if we applied for it to be a shared use path. I mean, we've typically done, the application's been for sidewalk gaps. So if it's a wider sidewalk, I don't see why we couldn't do it. I mean, we've made applications for pedestrian hybrid beacon signal crossings with this So we haven't done it before, but it could be an option. I don't think we've costed out this section of Naismith for a shared use path. For that half mile, it would be expensive. It'd be, I haven't looked at it, but I'm assuming it would be much more than 1 year's worth of CDBG application. So it's a bigger project than just a simple gap type project, looking at the right of way. So I think it's more of a CIP planning type project to do a shared use path. So it could take some time depending on the cost and the priorities as we get into allocating that bike ped funding. We've got all these, also have all these bicycle projects and priorities we want to do. Where would this fit in to all of those other projects? So,
do you have the right of way there? Sorry, do you have the right of way there for a shared use path, or you would have to buy a right of way?
There would likely be some right of way acquisition, but we haven't looked at it, any of the designs for shared use path. It's been something that we've, going back, you know, I've been involved in these gap projects for a number of years. We've, in the past, wanted to do this as a gap project, but wasn't in the CDBG area. Those boundaries have changed. So we've, that's why we still had it on the list, because boundaries have changed, and this is one of the more visible areas in the community where you see what the lack of sidewalk does when you have that dirt path down the street. So I guess that's the question. If you know, if we want to wait to do a more extensive shared use path project, I would agree not to expend the funds for a sidewalk, but it's that's going to take some planning and budgeting to do the shared use path.
I guess, honestly, it's a little bit of a dilemma for me. I think what Michael and Gary are saying is pretty compelling. If you've got a wish list going, and I, you know, have lived in that area quite a while, and it would be, I would bike on a shared use path. I think like a lot of people would in those neighborhoods. On the other hand, not being able to get a sidewalk there for the foreseeable future, it's kind of a bad deal, too. I guess I'll just say that. I think it's a dilemma. Amanda, I think Charlie asked you, what would be another project if we didn't have Naismith on this?
We haven't evaluated any others. I did check the ones you were talking about, Charlie. They, per our files, those were included in the Safe Routes to School on to the west. What's that?
How about on 19th? I mean, I just think those where you put a little bit in, if you can finish it up on 19th or 15th, that would be great. So it sounds like the 15th, that'll get it done. But like past Moody.
What's that? This is very not real user-friendly to use on GIS on my tablet, so it takes me a little bit to get anywhere you're talking about. It's very slow.
And one thing I would say is, Amanda's trying to pull that up, is we understand a lot of these questions and concerns in regard to the cost as well. We need, now that we have this privatization policy, we have all these lists of projects, 200 or more, whatever the number is, that we need to, it's going to take a lot of time to cost them out. And so we're trying to focus on the top priority and just pick some of the easier ones off the list where we know we could accomplish this project with a small amount of money and it scores high. It's going to take some time to go through and have a comprehensive list of cost and location for a lot of these projects. So I think we'll get there at some point. We're just, you know, with getting this scoring criteria complete and getting the list together, trying to get some time to put some numbers to some of these projects. It's going to take a while. Right-of-way is a huge cost on some of these projects that we need to go out and do some field investigation just to put preliminary numbers to some of these.
What
Can
would
you find it?
preclude? I guess what would preclude widening this out in the future to a shared use path if you put in a sidewalk now?
Well, by design, the shared use paths are a little thicker concrete, reinforced concrete, 6 inches versus 4. And, you know, we would prefer not to have a joint. So it could be done, I suppose, and you have a joint in the middle.
Could you just overlay 2 inches? You put down another panel next to it?
We haven't done it before, but it could be done, I suppose. I wouldn't recommend doing it. I'd recommend just doing it 10 foot wide, 6 inch thick. I think constructability, it'd make a little more sense to just do it all at once versus to try to tie it in.
I have a few comments, and I agree that what they presented is compelling, that it's hard to, if you put in a sidewalk, then you're sort of committed to that design. And I've been sitting here thinking, I think the first 2 on the list are perfect, you know, I'm pretty comfortable with, but this one, this is another example of how this commission is being asked to sort of approve things that are just sort of piecemeal and not part of a bigger concept, you know. And we're already, you know, putting in the crosswalk at 19th and Iowa, which is a good thing. And then there's the whole, all the stuff that KU is putting in there with all the student housing, and that's going to increase traffic, increase pedestrians, increase, hopefully, cycling. We're talking about trying to make 19th Street safe all the way from Iowa Street to the east, and then we want to connect to 23rd Street, which is no longer a highway. But if we wanted, sort of, we want to make this all part of this coherent whole, and I agree, you know, these spokes from the city out to the loop are going to be essential at some point. And I think we need to look at this part of Naismith as part of that larger picture, and not just something where we can put in a sidewalk as desperately needed as it is. I think we need to really look at it in terms of the bigger complete streets concept. So.
I have a question. The way the grant is written, is it written to say, provide examples of projects that you would do, or tell us exactly what projects you would do?
There's a description list, and I believe we just put, you know, a list of these gaps and the linear foot of what that gap is. So it would be, we're going to do this sidewalk segment from this street to this street. It's approximately 1,000 foot long, and leave it at that, and create a list. So in the past, we've put the application out there with a longer list of gaps than we knew we would be able to accomplish, and then we look at, and then once we got the money, we'd go back and look at some of the design challenges and say, oh, we can do this one, we can do more bang for our buck or more projects by picking these out of the list. And it wasn't as detailed up front before we made the application. We just had a list of projects that we knew would be priority type projects.
So how much extra work would it be to take the Naismith part off and find another segment just to put on your list?
Well, we can put it on there, but the struggle we have is that we have to provide this month before we meet again. So trying to look right now at the rest of 19th Street. The reason this 19th Street piece was selected and not the others was this is on Safe Routes to School. As you go further east, it's not, or west, it's not. So we had filtered by Safe Routes to School, and we're trying to provide things on Safe Routes to School. That's why these other 2 segments that I'm seeing here on 19th closer to Leonard weren't proposed. Not to say they couldn't be, but we were trying to focus.
But I think that when people are out there, just staying on a continuous sidewalk on 19th is really critical. That that street is a hard one to cross. And so if you're walking along on the south side and then suddenly the sidewalk ends, that's a big deal. I would think filling in the gaps as much as you can on the south side of 19th would be a higher priority than messing around with Naismith right now. I mean, maybe you stop at Harper because you're going to do some work on that. So.
Oh, I'm talking the other direction.
Yeah, I know. But even going further to the other direction, I think between Clare Road and Edgeley Road, there's no sidewalk on the south side.
I've got there's two segments here. 19th, it's not quite Barker to Lennar, and then from Lennar to just shy of Delaware were two other segments, 140 foot long each. They are not safe routes to school, but they are on an arterial. Those are potentials if you guys are comfortable, if you're more comfortable, I guess, staying on 19th Street versus focusing on the safe routes to school, those are potential options.
Well, I had a question about Naismith. Dave, you had said something about you can apply for this grant and build a shared use path if you applied specifically that way.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I'd have to double check to see if that's eligible. I mean, but we've applied for other types of facilities, so I don't see why not. We just haven't done it in the past. We've done speed bumps and signals and.
But it wouldn't be a big enough grant to do the entire thing.
No way. Yeah.
Half?
And this was applied for already as a sidewalk gap. I would think you would have to do it at the beginning with the application.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this year, we already put in the application for sidewalk gap.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking now, I had one more question, but I don't think it really matters to what I think should be done. But you had mentioned that there are driveways and that 10-foot shared use path would interfere with, but I can only see one. Do you know how many? I mean, on the Google map, I can only identify like one clear driveway that would be.
Yeah, I know there's one driveway further to the south. I was looking at it earlier. There's a couple other houses that face the side streets that you get very close to the side of their house. And then as you go further north, there's some driveways that aren't quite as close, garages, but it's still going to encroach on their driveway significantly.
Right.
There is one house that's extremely concerning to try to fit that much, because I don't even think you'd leave enough room in their driveway to park a car.
I think what's going to happen on Naismith, though, if you don't provide a 10-foot shared use path, is you're going to put in a 5-foot sidewalk, and bicyclists are still going to use it because they're not going to feel comfortable on Naismith. So they're going to use that 5-foot sidewalk as a shared use path, would be my thought. So,
David, the last time that you guys did sidewalks, what was your average cost per running foot? Do you know what that number was? I'm trying to get a handle on how far the 150 is going to go. I mean, if I realize it's a year later, 2 years later. But.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say around $30 a square yard, which is.
So that's $10 a running foot.
yeah.
No.
These are,
Yeah.
and I'll bet the property lines are like right out here.
Yeah, that's the backyard, or side yard.
I'm looking at the Google map of Naismith. On the east side, there are a lot of homes that are close.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
There are.
Yeah.
I think it would be a real challenge to put a 10-foot walk. Michelle, don't you? You walk that, don't you?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
opens up
great
really wide
idea,
in
but
some areas, and then there's a couple areas that kind of go in and out of very skinny.
But if we, well, I mean, I'm inclined to leave Naismith alone for now. I get all that, but I also think there are other things that can be done if we're really looking at that as a spoke and a vision. I think it's kind of a critical spoke.
Did you come up with something?
I don't want to take a guess at what the number is. We got to take a look at. I don't have any recent bids, and I know we've been getting all over the place on some of our sidewalk gaps bids with retaining walls and other things outside of just the concrete. So I'd hate to, I mean, when we've been bidding just the concrete, it's been around $25 to $30 a square yard. But there's other costs that would say could add 25% onto that,
Okay, just
depending on the
sometimes
location.
that rough information would be helpful to know what we're looking at, because quite honestly,
Do we have estimates?
I don't think we could even, if Naismith stayed on here, I don't think we could get much of a start on it even for a sidewalk. I do agree with Charlie. It doesn't make any sense to start and rebuild a sidewalk to nowhere just to have a longer sidewalk to nowhere. I think we ought to finish those out if we're going to start them.
I guess I'd like to suggest looking at, you know, the arterial streets that don't have sidewalks that are in the CDBG area. That would cover 19th. There's also, it looks like Haskell between 12th and 14th has no sidewalk on the, looks like the east side of the street.
Yeah, I found this little, there's a little gap on 19th from Claire to Agelia. Edgelia.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
Mhm.
It's not at Safe Routes to School. Again, that's why some of these weren't coming up in our original search. We were trying to focus on Safe Routes to School first, but I get what you're saying.
I
That,
appreciate the safe routes focus for sure.
but if you want us to look, especially like along this 19th Street, we can add those to the list of potential. We have in the past provided more projects than the funding will allow. And just because we requested 150 doesn't mean we'll even get that full amount. So we're really throwing out a potential project list, and I think that it can be longer, given what we've done in the past, than what we can fund with it. So if you would like me, if your direction is to add the other segments on 19th Street in that vicinity, we can do that.
Particular projects don't have to be chosen tonight, do they? Or do they?
What's that?
A particular project doesn't have to be selected tonight, does it?
It just makes the application stronger if we put in there. We could leave it open-ended.
Well, no, I
but
mean, if you got direction from us to select something along 19th or some guidelines, and then
yeah.
If you want to give staff that, I mean, I know where Charlie's focused on, I, mentioned a few of them. If you want to give staff the direction to remove Naismith and consider the other projects along 19th Street, then I can take that direction and do the submission.
And then you can get your application done in time.
Yeah.
Is that going to give you enough to?
I believe between all of those it would.
Haskell Avenue to me is another one of those pretty
I'll throw it on them too.
significant
I mean, it's
arterial.
not, which Haskell?
Between 12th and 14th. I'm just looking at arterials and thinking, are there some gaps there?
Do we need to make the recommendation to drop Naismith and add these? I'm asking the chair.
Okay, yeah, so I'd say
That would be my
motion to-
motion, that we drop the Naismith and direct staff to add some of the streets that we've talked about. I know that's pretty vague, but.
Is that a motion?
Yes,
All right.
Second.
Or
Okay.
just more broadly, just say arterial streets.
that's fine.
Missing.
I'm comfortable with that wording.
So there's a motion by Commissioner Ziegelmeier to drop Naismith from the CBDG grant and add, did we have that specific, the 19th from Edgelia to Claire? Do we need to specify?
I'm just saying, missing the gaps along 19th Street.
Okay, so gaps along 19th Street. To the application proposed project list for the CDBG grant. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Motion carries 9-0. I'm sorry, I might not have finished that. Was that Catherine Schertz? Okay. Commissioner Schertz.
Could I have a request to Dave and Amanda? Down the road, we're going to be looking at Naismith for a shared use path. Would be nice, I know you guys have plenty to do, but on our wish list of looking at the feasibility of a shared use path in that location, is that reasonable to put on your list at some point?
Well, I think when it comes up, when we see where it scores on bicycle facilities, which we would consider a shared use path of bicycle facility, I think when we see what this segment scores on a bicycle facility, that's the time when we would start looking at what type of facility and that type of thing. So
one other.
I mean, that's when I think we would be considering what facilities and which projects. So
Yeah, I was even thinking protected bike lane on Naismith. I mean, if there's not enough room, we're not going to make the buses and trucks go away, but if it were a protected bike lane, I might get on it.
yeah, I know that those are things we'll look at as we, like I said, as we move into recommending actual bicycle projects for selection.
I think one other consideration is that next year when the bicycle plan is updated, there might be, I think that those two plans will be sort of integrated more, so it'd be a good time to look at it.
I agree.
Okay, so, all right. So agenda item number 8, funding split for 2017 and 2018 bike ped funding.
I believe you all are aware that there is a CIP line item titled Sidewalk Bike Ped Improvements ADA Ramps currently in the budget. There's $450,000 in the 2018 CIP. We also have a remaining $150,000 from the 2017 CIP. Some of that was used for the tunnel project and
Safe Routes to School match.
Safe Routes to School match. So that's the 150 remaining there. Total $600,000 that we basically are going to have to designate for this year. The staffs came up with kind of a thoughtful recommendation of the split for the funding. It's really where we need to start so we can start looking at which projects we want to recommend and consider for this year for each of these type of facilities. In this, we took into account the fact that we do have this $150,000 sidewalk gap CDBG grant that we've applied for. We also have $100,000 in 2017 CDBG money for ramp construction. And we also have $500,000 in Safe Routes to School, many of which are dealing with sidewalk gaps. Given that we have all those other sources of funding for sidewalk gaps and ramps, we thought that it made sense for a bulk of this money, at least this year, to go to bicycle facilities. Also, a lot of the higher ranked projects are on arterial streets. You know, in our initial look at where this ranking is going to fall out. And in those arterial streets, you're talking shared use path, which is not cheap in a lot of cases, or also some of them are bike boulevards, which also are not, it's not just striping bike lanes on a road. So these bicycle facilities that we would like to bring forward are a little more expensive than, say, the pedestrian facilities. That's why we've more heavily weighted our recommendation for this funding to bicycle facilities, at least this year. So our recommended split for this year is to do $100,000 in ADA ramps, $150,000 in pedestrian facilities, and $350,000 in bicycle facilities. And then, just so you guys know, kind of next steps after this, if this is approved, these are obviously approximate numbers also. If we have a bicycle project that ends up being $340,000, we would shift that $10,000 to ramps or sidewalks. These are kind of guidelines. You know, it's pretty hard to fall right at that number. We'll also bring back specific project recommendations at a future meeting. If we can get the funding split done, we'll bring back some potential projects and have the discussions on exactly what what projects this will fund. So.
Remind me again the approximate cost of an ADA ramp.
It kind of depends if it's on an arterial street where you're having to go both directions. it really depends on if it's just a straight ramp, a couple $1,000s. If you're having to relocate different utilities and stuff outside, it can get quite a bit more expensive. What do we figure on some of the smaller streets? 1,500?
Yeah, 12 to 1,500, just ballpark.
When you bring back the specific project recommendations, will we actually see ADA ramps, or is it just the ped and bike facility projects?
Per the policy, how we said we would deal with ADA ramps was we would select an area. So we may come back and say we're going to deal with safe routes to school for this school or these two schools. And, you know, we'll obviously take a look at some approximate estimates and see how many we think we can get given the conditions in the area. ADA ramps are hard too, because sometimes to get it to work, you might have to chase the sidewalk back a ways. So it's really hard to throw an exact number at what each of those is going to cost. So that's why I think the best way to approach those is to say, we're going to focus in this area and try to improve as many as we can this year. And so that's what we plan to do, is basically to kind of find an area we feel is in need and recommend that.
I guess what I'm kind of curious is how we were going to, like, I don't remember the specific number, but it seemed like it was well over $1 million, maybe a few million, to address the ADA ramp issue. And so this is a pretty small drop, and I'm curious how we would prioritize the ADA ramp issue. You know, if it's,
well, it's part of the prioritization policy. I mean, it's going to be based on safe routes to school and the volume of traffic on the road and all of those things. So obviously we're going to try to focus on those high priority areas first. Yeah, there's a huge need, and we're not going to get there with this amount of money, but I think it's a better, versus say we're going to do one ramp over here and one over here and one over here, I think it's better to hit an area and get them as many as we can in compliance and then move to another area. And so that's kind of how we were going to approach this, was really try to focus in on one area at a time and get as many as we can done.
And then will we see the other project recommendations together, or will they be separate? Like, we'll see PED one meeting and bike another one.
I think we would plan on bringing them together, and bringing kind of our recommended projects along with a few others. That's where we're said, you know, we've combined a lot of the, I don't know exactly how many sidewalk gaps there is now, because we've combined and added a lot and everything, and really we were just finishing that up even in the last week, and we have to go through and really start putting some cost to those, and we plan to do that. They're going to be high-level estimates at this point when we come back, because we also have to recognize that approximately 10% of this money is going to have to go to design fees. So we're going to do a high-level estimate to basically get a buy-in on which projects, and then at that point we'd have to engage a design professional and start getting into design to really refine these.
Any other questions? Is there any public comment on this funding split?
Just real briefly, in the past, there's been some complaints from commissions and from the city commission specifically about how bikes and PEDs are fighting with each other. But I want to thank staff on this split. This is an excellent split, and even though the pedestrian facilities are less than half of the bicycle facilities, this other money available, it really makes a lot of sense. And I tell you, 2018 sounds like an exciting year in improving the quality of multimodal transportation in Lawrence, Kansas. So I'm real excited. I love to see this split. This looks really good, and the other monies that are available brings them up to kind of an equity. So well done. This is going to be an exciting year.
Thank you.
Good evening again. I'll be quick. I appreciate the breakdown of the funding ratio, $300,000 for bicycle facilities. And I would reflect back on the previous agenda item that in our estimation, the shared use path along Naismith would be $297,000. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it was numbers that we got from Public Works. Also, the shared use path is both bicycle and pedestrian, so it wouldn't necessarily all have to come from bicycle funds, but that could be your choice. So thank you.
Any other comments, commissioners? Is there a motion to approve proposed funding split?
Make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Dillon and a second from Commissioner May. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, nay? Motion carries 9-0. Let's see, so staff items, number 9.
We have several items tonight and staff items. First one being traffic calming and signage moratorium. Not going to read the memo. You guys all have seen it, and but the bottom line is, in the coming months, you know, we've talked about it, that we're going to be working on a new policy to replace the current traffic calming policy that's, I think, was dated 2005. We all have recognized some shortcomings with that policy, and feel like it's really time to do that. We believe also we should kind of wrap in the signage requests. Often those are kind of hand in hand. So the new policy will be addressing all of those type of requests and how they should be processed. We've been getting a pretty high number of requests, and we have limited funding every year, and we already have a list several years long that, so we think putting this moratorium in place will allow us the time to really be able to focus on working on the policy and kind of hold off on those. Also recommend that this year we're going to go ahead and go forward with the current ranking for the 2018 traffic calming funds. Already working on the projects. You guys should be seeing that soon as far as our recommendations on the projects. And then we recommend when that when the new policy is put in place, that we reevaluate everything that's currently on the list to the new standard and have discussions on what actions we want to take on each of those. So this is just really kind of a heads up that that's something we're going to go ahead and institute just to allow us that time to focus on it. And this will be going, I believe, to City Commission as part of the City Manager's report, just so they're aware also.
So I guess my question is, are you asking for our approval, or you've already decided this?
No, it was something put in place by the City Manager's office, so we're just really notifying at this point.
My only concern is we don't have a time frame in there. In other words, and I think it's unfair to the citizens not to have a relief somewhere after some point. We can't just always say, I'm sorry, we've got a moratorium on no parking signs, we've got a moratorium on stop signs. My preference would be that we put the moratorium in place for 90 days, pick a number. But I think that gives us then, as a commission and you as a staff, some kind of a guideline to come back with to have the policy set.
Yeah, I mean, our intent would be it's this year. So next year, when we're looking at that funding, we have a plan for it. Obviously, we want to have a plan for next year's funding before this time next year. Also, let me point out that we're not going to say we're not considering any request. If there's a safety concern near a school or a stop sign that there's real need for, we're still going to consider those, and you guys will still see those in the meantime. This is for more the traffic calming items and also the no parking requests on residential streets, those type of things that we get. This isn't to say that if there's a safety concern, especially an immediate safety concern, that we aren't going to address those items. So something I forgot to mention, but I wanted you guys to be aware that it's not just we aren't considering anything, and that's the bottom line. So there still will be some requests. I actually have a couple pending right now that you guys will probably be hearing next month. But our intent definitely is that this is will be resolved this year. Hard to put a timeline on it because there's other departments involved. There's potentially some city codes we need to work on as far as getting those amended, or so that's why I'm hesitant to say 90 days is sufficient time at this point.
Thought it had been phrased while looking at the current traffic calming policy. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, I mean, the moratorium would be lifted at the point a new policy was approved. This is in the time of that we're trying to approve new policy. We don't want to keep adding projects to the list that's already too long to fund without really looking at the policy and coming up with some better solutions.
So I don't know, you don't really need anything from us as far as just letting us know that it's happening, and
and I'm sure you guys will be getting updates at meetings and at study sessions on where we're at on the policy to make sure that we're still moving forward in a timely manner with this. And if at any time you have concerns about it, just bring it up. Like I said, I just hesitate to put a time limit on it because there is a lot involved, and we're trying to make this a lot broader than what it currently is as a policy. I mean, I could obviously sit in my office and write a new policy tomorrow, but we want to look at it kind of broader, and as we talked about, bring in the police department and things like that, so.
I wonder about, commission, I mean, this policy has been used for many years when there was no funding at all, and now there is funding. What's the commission's commitment to that funding if there's a moratorium on the policy? Can they see it as, well, there's still plenty of projects in the queue?
There's 3 years worth of projects in the queue right now.
Will they hear it that way, or will they hear it as, we're going a different direction? And we're going to even go as far as reprioritizing this list once we determine the new policy? It kind of signals to me that there's a different approach to this. So maybe that 200,000 could be used for something more important. And just want to be clear, like that could be an interpretation that they might have.
Well, and I think that we want to consider that. Is there other approaches to traffic calming other than putting speed humps in everywhere? And if that money can be used more effectively for other things that will accomplish the same goal, I think that's on the table.
Available, is what I'm saying, because it does, I think it's a safe interpretation that someone would hear that and say, well, we're going in a different direction, we don't need to put aside money every year for traffic calming projects.
Well, that's not, I'm not saying that wouldn't be somebody's idea, but that's not what we presented, and that's not what city manager's office has in mind at this point. They've been involved in this decision. They know the things we're considering, and our intent right now is that money would be used in some capacity for something that gets to the same goal. Obviously, city manager recommends the budget and city commission approves it, but
can we look at all staff items together? Does that work?
Yeah. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is just really information that the speed monitoring trailer, this is kind of the first step towards working with the police department on some of these issues we're seeing with the speeding in town. We've been working with the police department to really go out to some of these areas that are on our traffic calming list and other areas that we're getting complaints, and try to put this trailer out about a week at a time in each location. Then they take it back in and charge it, and then we move it to the next location. So just wanted you guys to know as you see it out there. Been getting some positive feedback on it being at certain places. So I think it's just something that shows that even though we can't deal with every speeding issue right this minute, we're doing something and we're doing what we can. So.
I guess it's my turn to talk. Thanks, Amanda. So other staff items. Good news. Recently, the city Public Works Department and Parks and Rec received an award from the Kansas Ready Mix Concrete Association for the Baldwin Creek Rec Trail. That's the 10-foot wide concrete shared use path that's north of the sports pavilion. So if you haven't been on it, check it out. It's a really neat trail, certainly award-winning, and really commendable for the staff that worked on it. I know our design staff helped put together some of the plans, and Parks and Rec had a lot of time vested in the project too. So for all those that worked on that, it was a great project. So I wanted everyone to hear that news. The next item, update on 10th in Indiana. Back in, what was it, last July, we had this item on an agenda to look at a four-way stop. At that time, the commission decided to deny the request for a four-way stop, but asked that we would come back and present crash data 6 months later, which had been last November 2017. And that date was a year from when we had installed some signage there at the intersection that cross traffic does not stop. And so we went back and looked at crash data over the last 6 months, and there's been no crashes reported at that intersection, so wanted to pass on that information. And then the next item is an update on Haskell Lane and 29th Street. So this goes back to the Traffic Safety Commission. They heard a request for closing Haskell Lane at 29th Street. After that was realigned, Haskell was realigned with the South Lawrence Trafficway project. Back when we got that request, we got traffic data, and in the memo kind of shows you some of the numbers on the traffic that was cutting through and using Haskell Lane instead of Haskell Avenue. So 88% south to westbound, and about 69% it looks like southbound or eastbound to northbound. Those numbers were similar when we got traffic counts again here recently. So I guess the traffic numbers were down a little bit, but the percentage of cut-through traffic was the same. We have seen some movement through planning on a rezoning request for some land adjacent to that area, and even a concept plan for a street realignment with a potential redevelopment project over there in that area. And so at this point, we're just providing this information. I think that this is something that we need to look at in the future, particularly if any development occurs over there, to try to address this issue. I think the appropriate street for the majority of traffic should be on Haskell Avenue and not on Haskell Lane. It's not really what it was designed and built for. So with that being said, I think that this is something that we need to continue to keep an eye on, and then with potential redevelopment, try to address the issue. I would note that we still have preliminary plans to put in a shared use path on the south side of 29th Street, which is a connection there between Haskell and the Haskell Rail Trail and Haskell Street. It was a project we started doing in-house design plans on, and we've been on pause a little bit on it just with staffing levels, and still we are trying to move forward with finishing the plans for that so that we can get that constructed here this year. So I wanted to note that we haven't forgot about that project, and we will look to keep moving on that. And that is all that I have for staff items.
Are there any comments on staff items? Public comment on staff items? Quick public comment.
I want to comment on the last item, but before I do so, on the traffic calming policy, I really like the staff approach on that to look at a broad range of city ordinances and resolutions and how it all factors in together. That's a good idea. My question, similar to Commissioner Ziegelmeyer, though, is in the time frame of developing a policy, I assume that there'll be, a presentation for the public comment or review or feedback. I mean, how's this going to work is my question.
Yeah, it'll be brought to a future Transportation Commission meeting. There'll probably be some discussions at study sessions as we progress, but you will see it on a regular agenda also before approvals.
Great, thank you. This is the area of 31st and Haskell. The north green area there is 29th Street. And the upper right-hand corner is the intersection in question that is considered dangerous by a number of people. Right here, this is Haskell Avenue, this is Haskell Lane. And this retail development proposed by Scott Zaremba would basically close a lot of Haskell Lane. In October of 2016, yeah, I think that's right, Sustainability Action had proposed not the closure of Haskell Lane, but the closure of the north entrance to Haskell Lane, leaving the street open down to 31st so that any industrial traffic or commercial traffic could still enter that way. The Traffic Safety Commission at that time saw the same numbers that Mr. Cronin has presented and were equally concerned, but they said they wanted to wait until the South Lawrence Traffic Way opened to see if the numbers changed. Well, apparently they haven't. There's still the same, if not more, proportion of cut-through traffic. It went to the Planning Commission 15th of November 2017. This development plan did. And I should also show you, these are the properties that are owned by Scott Zaremba that are circled in red. The development that he's talking about in the development plan is through here and then over on what used to be the Hyper property. He's in partnership with, it's a consortium of people that own that, and he's been in discussions with, I forget what's his name, the owner of Kirk Welding, which now is called Praxair, actually. So he doesn't own that, but that's potentially part of the major development, just as a background. So at the Planning Commission, it was a very interesting discussion. The minutes aren't available yet, but it's very informative listening to the audio. A few things that I noticed in the audio, Commissioner Kelly, who is the director of the College and Career Center at 29th and Haskell, part of that complex there, Planning Commissioner, he said that 29th and Haskell is known to be very dangerous. There's lots of buses from his facility, school buses and others, and speeding cars. It's not a good intersection. This is the intersection we're talking about. The Career Center would be up here. This is Haskell Lane. And the speeding traffic, there's speeding traffic coming this way, but also this is the concern that we brought up 2 years ago. the speeding traffic that does the zigzag through here. There's a stop sign here, a stop sign here, a stop sign here, but none for this. So people just flow right through at as fast as they can make those turns. The bicycle path theoretically would come along 29th Street to a bridge over the creek, cross Haskell Lane, and join the South Lawrence Trafficway Trail. That crossing there would be the dangerous crossing, which is why we proposed closing that intersection and putting the trail across there. So that's the context. Another comment at the Planning Commission, and I didn't get the commissioner's name from listening, but he said, it's difficult for bicyclists crossing Haskell Lane. There's nothing to stop that traffic just zipping through. Oh, and Commissioner Kelly also said he loves the idea of closing Haskell Lane. I can't read my own writing. So anyway, that's the context, that's the background. The Planning Commission, as well as the Traffic Safety Commission, the Planning Commission passed the zoning, changed from IG zoning to IL zoning. Beyond that, the development plan will be a whole nother proposal. It'll come back at some point when Mr. Zarem is ready. And then more details of the actual layout, street configurations and all that. So just keep that in mind. That'll be coming at you at some point, we assume. So any questions on that? Thank you.
Move on to agenda item number 10, commission items, subcommittee minutes.
We have some brief minutes that Amanda posted. I think next month, famous last words, we're picking up steam on this, I think, and we're actually starting to look at language for the policy. So we're making progress.
I'd like to just point out that tomorrow night the City Commission is going to be considering the staff recommendation on Kingston Drive that we discussed in December. And our decision was to approve traffic calming on Kingston Drive, and staff is presenting to the City Commission their recommendation to deny. And the memo states that our position, was opposite of the staff recommendation. And we talked about this at the retreat, but I wanted to be just clear with everybody that this is going to happen tomorrow night. And I had asked Amanda if there was any, if it was appropriate at all for someone from the Transportation Commission to be available at the meeting. Or how that worked out. So, and then I also asked for the traffic study that was done to be able to understand. I think our primary concern was that the speed eastbound going toward Hallmark was 45 miles an hour, the 85th percentile. And I've been on that road a few times now. I went on there again this weekend, and it just blows my mind that that's even possible. Such a short stretch of road. So. I was a little, I guess, I didn't really know how to interpret some of this. It indicates, in that case with the 45th percentile, 45 miles an hour eastbound 85th percentile speed. This says there's four vehicles that were traveling 75 miles an hour or faster, and 65 to 69 miles an hour. How do I interpret that?
Well, that's what the data says. With all data, I think there's a grain of salt that it's a device sitting out on the road. And
so the 85th percentile is 45 miles an hour, but if you look at the actual counts in the buckets here, that's two vehicles that were going 45 to 49, 2 50 to 54, 2 55 to 59, 2 that were over 65, 4 over 75. It seems crazy that people would drive that fast on this road. And so I kept thinking, like, here we go with, having a moratorium now on the calming policy, but when the neighborhood comes to us with this concern about traffic speeds, I'm hoping that our new approach is not going to get into, well, is there in fact a problem or not? Because it feels like there is a problem. This is evidence that there is a problem, and we recognize that the policy has limitations. I think that's why we disagreed with staff, and the fact that staff is now putting a moratorium, I think just kind of confirms that something we've been saying all last year, that there's a problem with the policy. So it feels a little like inappropriate in my mind that, or even go into the city commission to address this when the policy has a moratorium now. And there's obviously a problem with speeds on this road. So it almost feels as if you're signaling to the neighborhood that, hey, we really don't think there's a problem. And I think it just doesn't feel authentic to say that. It feels like there is a problem and we don't have the right solution, perhaps. But so I don't know. I just wanted to share that because I feel like this is the first time when this has happened where one of our recommendations is being presented and basically denied to the city commission. So, and I know we did talk about this at the retreat. I did bring it up with Steve the other day, and he didn't even remember it. So I thought, well, let's make sure that you guys know what's happening here. And
you refresh my memory.
Now you remember. Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
And
So
on Sunday or Saturday morning,
yeah.
I drove through it, and gee, you blink your eye and you're through that street.
Right. It's just
Gee.
hard to believe. So
It
I
is.
feel like there needs to be a way to address concerns when neighborhoods have that.
I do have one question specific to this. When you get towns like that, do you then walk over to the police department saying?
Yeah, that's an option.
Well, there's,
putting a speed sign up there.
that's something
would be
we
an
want
option.
to be able to do in the future, but
Is that something we do now, though?
there's not a traffic enforcement unit with this police department currently, so there's not really a way to address these things. And I don't want to say I'm not saying there's not a problem on Kingston. I'm saying there's a problem on a lot of streets in town. But is that the best use of the funds, the limited funds the city has, is really what the question is, instead of, is there a problem there? There's probably a problem on 80% of the streets in Lawrence with people speeding. And what we're trying to do as staff is look at the best use of the funds and what fits the policy. And the policy is it's very low volume and it impacts very few residents versus other streets that potentially have more of an impact. So and city manager's reason for putting this on is to pull our commission more in line with how planning commission operates. If there's a vote that's not unanimous or is against staff recommendation, it goes on city commission's regular agenda and it's presented by staff. Now, if you've looked at the city commission's thing, I put in there why Transportation Commission recommended what they did. They're not going to go and say staff recommends this and this is all they're going to hear. They're going to see all the same data, and they're going to hear why you guys also recommended that. But I just want to be clear that we're not trying to say that this neighborhood's not important or anything like that. And that's why we want to address the policy, because we want ways other than going and installing a speed hump that we can't do it everywhere, and there's a problem really everywhere. And so we want to be able to address this in a better way to where maybe we do a phased approach, and our first thing isn't go out and throw speed humps and diverters into every neighborhood. That's why the policy is.
The policy, is labeled traffic calming, but it seems like what it really is this narrow version of traffic calming that says it's a speed hump policy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were kind of constrained. So that's where I think when the neighborhood interprets the decision, however it gets made, I think it's just hard for them to realize this is about, we spend $20,000 on a speed hump. And I looked at that street thinking, what else could we do? I have no idea. I'm not an engineer, but I thought, could there be a stop sign somewhere? Well, it's not. There's not a cross street. So could there be one of those speed feedback signs so people could be alerted? I know on my street, a speed limit sign was put in there right on my yard, so that was one way an interim step before the speed humps were put in. I'm not sure people need to be reminded there. It just feels like they're out of control. I mean, honestly, with those numbers, I just was kind of flabbergasted. So, I don't know, I mean, there's really nothing to do. I just wanted to make sure that we had kind of awareness what was happening, and I think it's important, given that this wasn't probably what any of us expected, that when we have decisions, that we think about how they might be presented to the city commission. Just when I don't know, I don't want to in any way suggest the city commissioners won't read the staff agenda and understand this, but as I read it, consider staff recommendation to deny a request, blah, blah, blah. And then in parentheses, it says TC item number 5, approved 9-0 on 12/4/17. I think it could easily be read as, oh, the Transportation Commission agreed, they approved.
No, but
this staff
read the,
I know, I get that.
there's a piece before that. That's the little blurb at the end. I'll get up and actually present and say Transportation Commission recommended approval of this.
I mean, I appreciate that.
This is why.
I'm just thinking as it's read.
Well, but there's more to the memo than that's what
I'm not on the memo, I'm just on the agenda. So I think just as people peruse things, how it gets expressed that this is a different opinion than what we have, then it just seems like you have to dig a little deeper to read that. And then the explanation of our position, I thought was, it's buried at the very end of a paragraph. It's not a separate paragraph by itself. I think it's a paragraph about the Transportation Commission meeting, but not about our decision. And I think describing what happened in the meeting, describing our decision would have been maybe a separate paragraph.
They also have the minutes. They also have all the resident emails.
Yeah, I get that.
I also called the requester, who provided an additional email that was included. I mean, I feel like we've done our due diligence to notify them.
Sure. That's all I got.
Great.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? Calendar. So next study session, February 28th at 3:30 p.m.
It starts our Wednesday afternoon meetings.
Wednesday afternoon, 3:30 p.m.
And Amanda, you scheduled the webinars to occur on those same days?
No, it
Right
just
before?
happened that
Happened?
they aren't always, because some months Planning Commission
Okay.
moves theirs to the third Wednesday, so we had to move ours to the fourth Wednesday. And then in December, there was no Wednesdays available, so we're on Thursday. So trying to get in the calendar there, it just worked out that the times it is on the third Wednesday, I believe, it's the same day as the webinars that Jessica put out. So I think that's convenient. You can say I planned it that way, and I'll take that.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Adjourn. Siegelmeier and Holstein. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Nobody wants to say?
There was no.
No? No's? Were there no no's?